Good day, everyone. Good evening to those of you in Israel, and good afternoon to those of you in North America and Europe and anywhere else where it's the afternoon. My name is Paul Gross. I'm a senior fellow here at the Menachem Begin Heritage Center in Jerusalem. And we are here for the latest in our series of Zoom events, weekly series in English, where we hear from journalists, politicians, public figures, important and influential figures in Israeli life. And occasionally we actually get the opportunity to speak to someone who not only has made an extraordinary contribution to Israel, but has actually written about it and has a book to talk about. And that's the case today. I will introduce our speaker very shortly. Let me briefly say that for those of you who are new to this, how it's going to work is I'm going to speak with our guest for about 20-30 minutes, and then there'll be the opportunity for you to ask questions by writing them into the chat box here on Zoom, which you'll find at the bottom of the screen. And I will read out some of those questions. And we'll have about an hour with in total with our guest. Let me get to it. We are extremely privileged and honored to have with us Mr. Shabtai Shavit, who was the director of the Mossad, Israel's intelligence service, I'm sure I don't need to tell you, from 1989 until 1996. He held a variety of positions within the Mossad for over 32 years before rising to the top position. As a soldier in the IDF, he served in Sayeret Matkal, which is Israel's elite special forces unit. And he has an advanced degree also from Harvard University. After his retirement from the Mossad, Shabtai Shavit was the CEO of Maccabi Health Services Group here in Israel for 5 years. Since 2001, he's been the chairman of the board of directors of the International Institute for Counterterrorism in Herzliya, which is part of the IDC in Herzliya. He's also been an advisor to the Israeli National Security Council, advisor to the subcommittee on intelligence of the Knesset, and the Committee on Foreign Affairs and National Security. And he's also chairman of Athena Human and Technology Integrated Solutions Limited. His memoir, which was originally published in Hebrew, of course, came out in English last year as Head of the Mossad in Pursuit of a Safe and Secure Israel. I think, Shabtai, you have a copy with you, which you can show us. There you go, Head of the Mossad in Pursuit of a Safe and Secure Israel, written by Shabtai Shavit, former head of the Mossad. And it's available from Amazon and I believe also in bookstores here in Israel and elsewhere. I had the good fortune not only of reading the book, but actually of writing a review of the book. So I actually read it pretty closely and learned an awful lot from it. Shabtai Shavit, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
Thank you very much. So let me first ask, what was interesting about the book, I thought, was that it's part history, it's part personal memoir. There's lots of personal anecdotes in there. And it's also an assessment, your expert assessment of current security challenges as well. So I wonder if we can start just by asking, when you wrote the book, what was your main objective? Did you want to sort of tell a story, or did you also want to sort of give your expertise to what's going on right now?
Well, first of all, I want to make the point that it took me about 20 years from the day I resigned, until I decided to write. The reason for that is the very old organization's culture of compartmentation, of secrecy, and so on and so forth. So it took me a very long time to make a decision to sit down and to write the book. And as I mentioned, it took me since 1996 till 2017 till I made the decision. It took me a year and a half to write it, and one decision that I made at the outset of writing was that I'm not going to write a book of a cloak and dagger kind of stories, but rather it's an accumulation of 32 years of experience and an accumulation of thoughts, feelings, recommendations, narratives, and the common denominator is of course the security of the state of Israel. From my personal experience and personal observations, and I thought that it may contribute something to the Israeli public and even foreign publics. And I sat down, took me a year and a half to write it, published it in Hebrew, and then we published it also in English, and it was published by the Notre Dame University Press in the US, and it's on sale now.
Okay, yeah. I think we should. I'm very happy not only for you to recommend the book, but also to personally recommend the book. It's as I said, it's a great read, and it's very educational and informative. And I think that one of the things that was interesting for me was that there were a lot of the things that you were talking about, even the historical things, had a lot of current ramifications. So, for example, I recall you had some lengthy observations about fighting terrorism, a lot about counterterrorism, and the way in which the world is dealing with terrorism, specifically Islamic terrorism, and you had quite a lot of criticisms about the way that the West perceives the threat, and is fighting it. And I recall particularly the criticism that Israel gets for its for policies like targeted killing, targeted assassinations. And what was interesting was that I was writing the review a few days after the assassination of the Iranian nuclear engineer Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, by according to foreign sources, should we say, or according to foreign speculation, at the hands of Israel. I don't think it's been claimed, but it was interesting to read your criticism of the way the world sees this when Israel's being criticized for its targeted killings policy. Can you say something about that, about how you see the necessity of using that kind of tactic to deal with terrorism, and maybe also where maybe other parts of the world get it wrong in their criticism?
Well, I'm happy to say that today we are not being criticized anymore by other countries, because most of them have come to the conclusion that targeted killing should be and justified kind of capability that must be used against current and especially religious terrorism, in order to contain it and to stand a fair chance to fight it, and maybe down the road also to win this war. The justification that we had was first of all the limited amount of time of using this method. We did it very rarely and on very special cases, and to each and every, and I'm talking about during my time. I'm talking about the regulation that we were following back in the 80s, 90s of the 20th century. Today it is different, but those days, each and every such operation had to get the approval of a special community, a governmental community, which consists of the Prime Minister, the Defense Minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And in order to approach them to get the approval, you had first to pass also the special committee of the heads of the security and intelligence organizations in Israel. So we were very strict on this matter, and each and every case should have passed the following conditions. One, that the target must be of a extremely high potential to cause harm to Israel. Secondly, the potential target does have blood on his hands already from previous terrorist activities. And thirdly, that the timing is such that we have very solid information that the target is in the planning and executing his next operations. So this was the environment in which we used this kind of weapon. And at the beginning, of course, it was hard for especially people of friendly intelligence organizations abroad. And more than that, people of politicians and governments and so on and so forth. But down the road, they were convinced that in order to fight present day terrorism, which is mainly of religious character, we have to use it. And some other reasons why it was necessary. One is because the conditions of the war zone, so to say, is a civil one. It is a war of people who are civilians and not military. It is a war between people on both sides that put on them civilian clothing. It is a situation where the terrorists, on purpose, being involved with other civilian people, many women and children as well, as a as a sort of a defense for themselves. And we had to execute this kind of operations without any collateral damage. So when your target is defending himself with ordinary and innocent people, you just cannot execute the operation. So these are just some of the constraints and the difficulties of dealing with this kind of an operation. Of course, it has it has got a very heavy moral reasons, which caused us to hesitate and to decide to use this method only in the extreme cases.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you write is how, and obviously this was after your time as director of the Mossad, but how things changed after 9/11, and the United States and other Western countries were kind of forced to see the reality of the Islamist threat that Israel had been aware of for such a long time. Another sort of big topic that's both current and is part of your book is Iran. One of the things that maybe I think most people probably that don't know your biography don't know about you is that you spent a lot of time in Iran as a younger Mossad agent in the days, of course, when Israel and Iran had friendly relations before the revolution. And you were not, as I recall from the book, you weren't in Tehran. You were in some sort of, I remember reading your description of it, this sort of swamp, sort of backward part of Iran. Can you tell us what you were doing in Iran, what your mission was in Iran at that time, and why you were in this very sort of primitive part of the country?
Well, it was back in the 60s. I'm using the plural tense because we served in Iran, my beloved wife and myself. We went there as a fresh married young couple, and it was during the era of the Shia. At that time, the relationship between Israel and Iran were extremely close, and they allowed us to use their territory in order to address our special concerns and problems. And in the Iranian case, we used Iran in order to penetrate to Iraq and the Gulf states and other countries which were adjacent to the Iranian territory. At the same time, we also had a cooperation, very good and close cooperation with the Iranian intelligence. And we supported them in training and learning the craft and so on. So to be precise, I'm talking about the time that Iraq was the first country in the Middle East who got Soviet weapons systems. And Israel needed the intelligence on this weapon systems and technology because we were in a situation of war with our neighbors. And since the Iraqis were the first Arab country to get Russian hardware and technology, we needed a venue in order to penetrate that country. And the place where we lived in Iran was close to the Iranian-Iraqi border. And the border was porous, and the people who lived on both sides of the border were, some of them were Iranian, most of them were Arabs. So these were the reasons and the situation which brought us there. And in retrospect, I can say that it was a very smart idea, even though the life over there was very hard. But the results of our presence there, just to sum it up in a sentence, in the 67 war, the IDF had all the intelligence, operational, and the technology, and the training and doctrine, and you name it, in order to prepare the war. And most of this intelligence came from there. And I can say proudly that the fact that Israel overcame half a dozen of Arab countries in a war which took not more than 7 days or 6 days. One of the reasons was that the IDF was extremely well prepared to that campaign.
It's really, reading the book, I know you said at the beginning in this evening that you didn't set out to write a sort of a book, which went into the details of operations and that sort of thing, and that's right. It's not that kind of book, but you do get the sense from reading the book just how crucially important the human intelligence is, and the way that the Mossad operates with human intelligence in a way that other agencies don't. And what I found really interesting that I really had no idea about was the extent to which the Yom Kippur War proved to be this kind of turning point for the Mossad and the way it was perceived by the state of Israel, by the government. And I think from reading it, the sense that I got was that before that point, it was kind of the poor relation to IDF military intelligence, which was much better resourced, a much bigger organization. It had the authority of the IDF and the defense minister behind it, and they failed. The military intelligence failed in terms of the lead up to the Yom Kippur War. Whereas, if I remember, there was human intelligence from the Mossad, which, had it been listened to, would have meant that the Egyptian-Syrian attack in October of 73 wouldn't have been the surprise that it was. Can you say something about that and what that meant, how things changed?
Yeah, I can say a lot of things about that, but I'll be short. First of all, I belong to an older generation of intelligence people. Today we are living in a era where we get almost all the answers by technological means. You can sit in Tel Aviv and start a war in Iran without any without any connection, physical connection. Those days, the situation were entirely different. And you know, in intelligence, as an intelligence officer, you had to deal with two layers of information. One is the capabilities of your enemy, and the other one is the intentions of your enemy. Now, in order to get the capabilities, it is rather relatively easy, because you're talking about weapon systems, about doctrine, about topics which is relatively not very hard to get. But when you come to the intentions of your enemy, and by using the word intentions, the main question, the main problem that exists between two countries which are in a state of war is he going to war against you or not? And if he decides to go to war, when is he going to start it? And what is going to be his main plan? These are questions that in the Arab world, since the Arab world is not very democratic, where decisions are being made by very many people, but rather with sometimes the decision is being made by one person. Sadat decided to go to war against Israel alone. And he kept, even from his most senior officers, generals, the exact date of opening the war as a secret. The war started on the 6th of October 73, and his commanders got the order to start the war 4 or 5 days before the 6th of October. So in this kind of a system, it is almost impossible to get this kind of information. And which proves that to us, to me, and to my generation, it proved that the human intelligence, which mean intelligence that you get from sources, when it comes to intentions, the ultimate source to give you the answers to intentions is agents and not technology. Technology gives you a piece of information at a certain point on the map and in a specific timing, but it doesn't give you the whole picture. And technology very rarely would bring you near to intentions kind of intelligence. So we were, and another thing that I want to mention humorously is that to get and to be successful in intelligence, luck is not a bad things to have. And when we are talking about Yom Kippur War, I mean the Mossad, we did have the luck of having the sources, the human sources that provide us with the adequate and important intelligence, which enabled the army to turn almost a defeat into a overwhelming success and achievements. Yeah.
Sorry, I'd muted myself and I forgot to unmute. Thank you very much for that. That's really, it was fascinating, and much of the book contains these really detailed and informative historical vignettes. And I think one of the interesting moments for me was you talked about, because of your experience in Iran, you also, there's a lengthy passage about Iran and the Iranian Revolution, explaining it in a very detailed way, and the nature of the Iranian threat. And I think in reading a lot of different analysts about Iran, I'm sometimes struck that there's like a divide between those that see the regime as basically rational, like that ultimately it will act rationally, kind of like the Soviet Union did, that it's not that a nuclear weapon would be a deterrent ultimately, and they wouldn't be sort of crazy enough to actually use it unless they were really sort of, facing an existential situation. And then on the other side of the divide are those that see the religious ideology of the Islamic Republic as having this irrational quality, and that gives an additional threat to the situation. And from reading your book, from my interpretation of the book, I would put you in the second camp. Would that be fair? Would that be accurate?
Well, let me say a few words on this topic, because the Iranian threat is still live and kicking, and we are dealing. I will say we is not personally me, but we Israelis and the government and the military and intelligence to this day. Now, I want to stress the point that the Iranian regime is a Muslim regime, and among the different sects of Islam, the Shia, which is the official religion in Iran, the Shia is the most extreme group in Islam. According to the Shia, the supreme leader, a spiritual leader, and this guy in Iran is Khamenei. He calls all the shots over there. He is, according to the Shia religious, he's infallible, meaning that whatever comes from his mouth, it comes from the mouth of Allah. Now, according to the Shia, they don't believe in peaceful coexistence between the Muslims and the infidels. And I use the English translation of the Arabic word. They don't say Christians or Jews or Buddhists, so on. The world is divided into two. One is the translation is the house of Islam, and the other one is the house of the infidels. And Islam is demanded by Allah to either convert the infidels to become real good Muslims, or otherwise they should be dealt with. this is the kind of adversaries that we have, and not only we, any other country that is not a Muslim country. Now, if and when Iran has got the nuclear capability, and the guy who's responsible to push the button is the spiritual leader, his main motivations are religious motivations. My question as an intelligence officer, when he has it, is he going to use it or not? And there are those, of course, who say that the Iranians are pragmatic in their decisions like others. From my experience, and my experience with Iran started back in the mid-60s, to this day, I learned the Farsi language in the bazaar of Tehran, and I used to see them during the days of remembrance when they used to walk the streets and bleeding themselves with knives and scissors and chains of steel and so on and so forth. And being an intelligence officer that has to recommend to his political master what to do, I keep on asking oneself to this day, should I tell him, no, they are not, he's not going to push the button, or the contrary, he is going to push the button. And I don't like the idea of being in this kind of a situation. But in intelligence, you can't afford to err. So my approach to this kind of situation is that if there is a doubt, there is no doubt. Because we are dealing in an issue which the result of an error could be a big war with many casualties and destruction of countries and so on and so forth. So this is the main dilemma to the decision maker, whether he can make his decisions based on rationale, or he cannot afford to do it because the other guy on the other side, his thinking is religious, is messianic. So I hope I made myself clear.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I think I've used up all my time. I have plenty of other questions, but I want to give a chance for our audience to ask, and there have been some questions written in. So I'm going to ask some of these questions to you. There was a question asking for clarification when we were talking about targeted assassinations. Someone asked whether if she's correct that Israel's Supreme Court actually ruled in favor of assassinations of so-called ticking bombs.
Yeah, well, the lady who asked is very well versed on even the Israeli style of fighting. Yeah, the ruling of the Supreme Court was exactly this. You can only use the targeted killing in the case of a ticking bomb, which means that the operation, the result of which is killing people or destroying places or whatever, is already in the doing. This is the meaning of the ticking bomb. In this case, and this is the only case that you can use this weapon.
Okay. We had a question about Osirak, the bombing of the Iraqi reactor in 1981, which is actually I didn't plant this question, but it's useful for my purposes, because next week we're actually going to be talking about that in the context of a discussion about Menachem Begin's role in that. But 1981. What was your role in the Mossad? Were you involved in some way in that decision or in the discussions around that?
Yeah, I was involved. At that time, I was a head of a division for one of the operational divisions of the Mossad, and my first involvement was that I had to bring intelligence about the place, about the location, about the reactor, about the area, and so on and so forth. And then I was involved also in the decision-making process, because I, being a, it was already high officer in the organization who worked in Iraq and who supposed to know Iraq. I was asked about my recommendations or thoughts, and the people in the room were those who made the real decisions, including the Prime Minister. So I was involved, and just allow me a word about the Osirak as compared to the nuclear infrastructure in Iran. You see, there are two main systems of processing, of building nuclear capability. One is based on the
uranium, enriched uranium.
Enriched uranium by centrifuges, and this is the Iranian system, and the other one is based on plutonium. Now the plutonium system entails only one building, only one structure, whereas the other system of the uranium, you can hide the centrifuges which produce the uranium in your backyard without anybody even know about it. And you can spread out your infrastructure. So the present Iranian infrastructure is spread out all over Iran. And Iran, just to give you an idea, is larger than the whole of Europe in size. So in the Iraqi case, since their system was based on plutonium, we had to knock out just one structure in order to finish the Iraqi or to destroy the Iraqi capability completely. In the case of Iran, this system is not sufficient enough to address the Iranian capability. So in Iraq, he took a squadron of 8 airplanes, fighters, who went there and knocked it out and came back safe and sound. Today, after so many years, I can share with you the fact that the Air Force asked us to provide them with real-time temperature and the clouds and the weather, real-time weather conditions above the target. For that purpose, we had to send someone from our people to be in the vicinity of the target with a good communication system, clandestine, of course, to provide us with the real-time weather situation over the target. Yeah.
Wow. So there was a question about the role of the role of the head of Mossad, and specifically their sort of public or lack of a public face in Israeli society. And the question reads that, am I correct to believe that previous heads of the Mossad have lived in the shadow, so to speak, while in office? And if so, what do you make of the current head of the Mossad's very public profile? You may or may not want to answer that.
Oh, well, I will answer it, even since it's a sensitive problem these days. You see, I was the last director whose identity was not known in the country and to the people. To tell you the truth, it hasn't disturbed me a bit. on the contrary, I didn't have to answer to questions that the present day directors are bombarded with from communication. Now, my attitude to this issue is that when the director of a prestigious intelligence organization is a non-entity, and your adversaries and enemies, they don't know anything about you. They know how you look. They don't know how you look. They don't know how you speak. They don't know your bio. They don't know anything about you. They think about you as a monster. This picture contributes tremendously to your deterrence. And I'm not talking about my personal deterrence. I'm talking about the organization that I headed. So since the identity of the directors has become known, and they appear in the press and they being interviewed and so on, so forth, I personally I don't like it. And in addition, I do believe that we do pay a price for that. But very many friends of mine answer me that this is the price that democracy maybe has to pay.
Interesting. I mean, just to follow up on that, it would be fascinating to get your view on this. Last week on this program, we had a conversation about the US-Israel relationship with Danny Dayan and David Makovsky. And we were talking about the speech that the IDF Chief of Staff gave, in which he was quite strong language against the against the nuclear deal with Iran. And a few days after he gave the speech, he was sort of the head of the Mossad came out and said something like he shouldn't have said that, or kind of criticized him somewhat. And I wonder what you make of this, of the sort of heads of security, Israel's security heads, if you like, publicly making statements like this. It also happened a lot when there was talk of us attacking the reactor, and the Prime Minister and the Defense Minister were apparently wanted to do it, and the head of the Mossad and the head of the IDF were against it. What's your view of that, sort of those issues?
You see, what you're saying now proves what I said before about the identity of the number one guy. Look, I'm familiar with the event as an ordinary citizen who watched television and listened to our leaders. I don't know if you remember, but among the things which he said, the chief of staff, there was one sentence which says that I instructed the army to prepare some plans for the eventuality that if and when. And when I heard this sentence, I asked myself automatically, without thinking, has he coordinated this sentence with the Prime Minister or not? If the answer to this question was positive, then it's okay. But if not, if it slipped out of his mouth, then the present head of Mossad was correct with his criticism.
Thank you very much. Very, very interesting. There was a question here about, I guess, going back to your discussion about Iran and the Shiite Islam, and the question was very simply, are they explicitly at war with Sunni Islam?
I'll say the following. The Shiites includes the Sunnis with the camp of the infidels. In other ways, the Sunnis are infidels like you and me in the eyes of the Shiites. But they say, let's finish with the other infidels, and then we'll start to fight the Sunnis, which is not correct in practice, because during the wars which started immediately after the spring revolutions in the Middle East, the war spread to many places and many concentrations of Sunni Muslims who were slaughtered by by ISIS. And being asked, why did you do it? They said, we had the opportunity, so why wait for a later date? And they started during these wars of the spring revolutions. The Shiites started to execute what until then they only believed in. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much. So let's have I think a final question here. One of the major developments over the past few months is the Abraham Accords, the agreements, normalization agreements with the UAE and Bahrain, and then later with Morocco and Sudan. In your book, you actually talk about what came before that, the secret meetings that went on, the secret relationship that was developing, I think with Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres with the Gulf states, and your involvement with those. So given your involvement in that and your knowledge of that, I assume you weren't surprised that this eventually happened. Can you say something about those sort of secret ties and how and what you think of what you make of the now public agreements between Israel and these countries?
Look, there is a lot to say about this topic. It deserves the whole lecture, but I'll say it very briefly. The Abraham agreements, standing on its own legs, is an important event, in the sense that after so many years, half a dozen Arab countries agreed to upgrade their relationship with Israel and to become public, and with some of them we are going even to establish diplomatic relations and so on and so forth. And Israel is, these days, in order to run away from the coronavirus, they spend their holidays in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. But having said that, we are now 72 years since the inception of the State of Israel. And I used to tell my audiences when I'm giving a lecture that we are still haven't finished our war of independence. And I believe that after 72 years, we do deserve a different kind of political situation and even a personal life. I have kids and grandchildren, and I would like them very, very, very much to be able to live in a country that has peace with its neighbors. So Trump succeeded to make an exchange between Netanyahu and the Emirates. He convinced him that he should stop annexation of another piece of earth in the territories. In return, he'll bring in few Arab countries and upgrading the relationship between Israel and those countries. And by the way, I can tell you that we did have relationship with all of them before, but the only one difference was that relationship were kept secret. I can tell you without divulging any big secrets that during my term as the director of the Mossad, I have visited all these countries. And I met with the leaders of all these countries. And it was, I believe, in '93, I took Prime Minister Rabin to a visit with the Qatari, not the Qatari, the Omani leader. So to me, it was not such a big deal because the only one change that Trump succeeded to introduce is until now it was the relationship were secret. Today, since today we will have this relationship in the open, and we'll push it to become official and diplomatic and so on. Nice, but what's next in relation to my dream? And I do believe that this event can and should serve as a window of opportunity to achieve maybe at long last, a solution for the conflict between us and the Palestinians. But in order to achieve it, you have to leverage this move which we started with. And in order to do it, we have to meet not very easy preconditions to be in the event. For instance, President Biden should change Trump's foreign policy of let's bring back all our soldiers and end all these stupid wars around the world. It doesn't indicate of a very thoughtful idea. We are living in a world which is completely transparent, a world of real time, a world that distances does not count, a world where in your living room you can see a terrorist attack unfolding in front of your eyes. And the world today is a real global village. And in global village, you cannot afford to, being a superpower, you cannot afford to say, sorry, I take a leave and I leave the world in order to go back to Fortress America. America cannot leave the Middle East. So America should stay in the Middle East. America should build a new axis in the Middle East, which will include the US with Israel, with Saudi Arabia, with Egypt and Jordan, with whom we already have peace agreements, and with the rest of the moderate Arab world. And this axis should serve as a signal, one to the Chinese, that listen guys, we are in a new form of Cold War. We Americans, America is here to stay. The same signal goes to the Russians who are mingling in the Middle East just because Trump and Obama before him gave them the permission to set foot in the Middle East. Thirdly, it is a message to a signal and a message to the Iranian. Listen, guys, we are here. Physically, we are here. And as long as we are here, you should bear in mind the fact that if how do you say it in English? If may come to shove, if how is the saying? Never mind. If we are here, and if necessary, we can take care of you within a fortnight. So make your calculations and play the game realistically and not messianically. And in such an environment, it is real simple to bring the Palestinians into the room, to sit with them, and to come to an agreement. I support the Saudi suggestion proposal from 2002, which is still valid, which is based on the notion of a two-state solution. And I believe that in such an environment, even if it takes 2, 3, 4 years, hence, and to finish this stupid situation of an unending war between us and the Palestinians, and we inherit to our next generations a peaceful country.
Bezrat Hashem, thank you very much indeed. It's a great way to finish. It's also you also ended with an example of what I read in the book and what other people can read in the book, which is your extremely thoughtful and detailed and thought-provoking and insightful assessment of our current situation, as well as your experiences, your long experiences in the Mossad. I warmly recommend the book. I thank everyone. I thank everyone for joining us, and thank Shabtai Shavit for sharing his time with us this evening. The book is Head of the Mossad in Pursuit of a Safe and Secure Israel. Get it, buy it, read it. It's a great addition to your bookshelf and to your education on Israel and the Middle East. I've written here my email address for those that aren't on my mailing list. Email me. I'll send you information about what we have here at the Begin Center in English. As I said, next week we're actually going to be discussing the Osirak, the bombing of the Osirak reactor. On Wednesday, we also have a special extra event in English on Monday, a book launch. You'll get details from me. It's also on our website and our Facebook page. But I'm going to thank Shabtai Shavit. I just want to say, Shabtai, that quite early on, one of our guests, one of our audience, wrote. She wrote in Hebrew, but I'll read it in English for the benefit of our non-Hebrew speaking audience. She said, "Thank you from Ra'anana to Mr. Shavit for his contribution to the security of Israel." And I just want to say it's a pleasure and a privilege to have you on, particularly because I think that we all know in Israel the great legendary figures, our prime ministers and our war heroes. But I think that the contribution of the Mossad to the security of the state of Israel is really beyond measure. And your book was a reminder to me, and I think will be to others, that some of the greatest heroes of Israel are those that are doing their work away from the public gaze, in secrecy. And I thank you. We all thank you, and it's been a great honor to have you on this evening. Thank you, Shabtai Shavit.
I thank you for having the pleasure of being with you today. But unfortunately, it was only one-way kind of talk. Thank you and good evening.